Um, so, welcome. My name is Laura. I'm an organizer with the Manitoba Energy Justice Coalition, which is the organization that has put together this event this evening. And I'm really honored to provide just some welcoming bits here off the top, and then I'll hand it over to our moderator and our amazing panel of speakers who you've all come to hear this evening. So just with some housekeeping to start off with, you can turn on closed captioning on the Zoom, which should be, I believe, an option on the bottom of your Zoom screen. If that is helpful for you, the captions are not perfect, but they are what we're working with this evening. Everyone should be muted, and you're welcome to either have your video on or off, depending on what you're comfortable with. You can also change your Zoom name to include your pronouns if you want to. If you click on the participant list and find your name, and you should have the option to rename yourself. For the questions this evening, we're really excited and welcome people to put questions into the chat at any point while our speakers are presenting. So you should see the chat option at the bottom of the Zoom screen. If you click on that, you should get a dialog box open on the right where you can type in your questions. Feel free to either direct a question at any one of the speakers or at the group more generally. And then we'll save the questions until the end after the four presenters and keep them all there. So don't worry, we haven't forgotten about your questions, but we'll get to them at the end. We also wanted to have a prioritized speaker list. So if you are Black, Indigenous, or a person of color, please feel free to, if you want to, put an asterisk next to your question so we can prioritize those to the top of the question list at the end. And if you would like to voice your question rather than type it, particularly for accessibility needs, please just let us know that in the chat or by direct message. Another thing you can do is use the reactions along the bottom to applaud our speakers or give a thumbs up as people are talking. Of course, we don't have the same energy as we would if we were at an in-person event, but we want to encourage people to respond and show their gratitude to our presenters this evening. And finally, we have a person on the call who is has changed their name, Melanie, to Zoom Respectful Space Support Person. So if you have any issues or questions or technical concerns, also you can just direct message Melanie by selecting that name in the chat box to send a message to. So I know more folks are joining, so I'll put some of these housekeeping notes in the chat as we go. But before we start, I wanted to, of course, acknowledge the land that we're on this evening. I think this whole conversation is really a land acknowledgement because any conversation around environmental racism is, of course, linked to colonialism and fossil-fueled capitalism that have shaped histories, the last 5 centuries of history on these lands. And any efforts to educate ourselves and to organize against the forces producing environmental racism must be centered around those people whose lands we're on. And so for me this evening, I'm on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene people, as well as the homeland of the Métis Nation. And I know people are calling in from all over the place. We already had someone tell us they were based in Toronto. So I would encourage everyone, if you're not on Treaty 1 territory here, to really acknowledge the land that you're on and carry that forward through this conversation and beyond with you. So the last thing I'll say is we've had a few people ask in the lead up to this event, what is environmental racism? And so I'll offer a very simple definition, and of course, we'll have a lot more information about this as we go on. For me, environmental racism really refers to the fact that our current capitalist society relies on resource extraction and environmental destruction and development that disproportionately impacts Black, Indigenous, and Brown communities. And these extractive projects and industrial development are most often built on Indigenous lands and next to communities or within communities of color, and disproportionately impact their health, their well-being, and their livelihoods. And that is not a coincidence in Canada. That is intricately a part of the systems that we rely on, that the country is founded on, and that sort of uphold systems of white supremacy. And so when we, as a group of climate justice organizers with the Manitoba Energy Justice Coalition, are thinking about climate justice, what does that look like in Manitoba and beyond? This question of an issue of environmental racism is at the center of that. And we also wanted to just acknowledge that the idea for this event came up in a anti-racism training that we did as organizers last year with Charmine Khan, and wanted to acknowledge their ideas here as well. So with that, I will introduce our moderator, who we are so excited to have this evening, Hazim Ismail, who goes by the pronouns dia, they, them, is a Bugis Malay Chinese queer anthropology and discard studies scholar with an MA in anthropology and collaborative master's specialization in contemporary East and Southeast Asian studies from the University of Toronto, a BA honors in anthropology from the University of Winnipeg, and a higher national diploma in business from Linton University. Dia's community advocacy focuses on newcomer, migrant, queer, gender nonconforming, BIPOC intersections, melding their own experiences as a former refugee and stateless person within their academic, artist, and professional background. Dia is committed to providing spaces for non-hegemonic, decolonial understandings and expressions of genders and sexualities to thrive. And with that, I will hand it over to Hazim.
Hi, I didn't realize how long my bio would sound verbally. I'm sorry. Welcome everyone. Thank you for having me, MEJC. In terms of just additional kind of accessibility notes, before I begin, I do have a vision impairment. So if you see me kind of mimicking a late 90s Missy Elliott music video, it's actually me just trying to see the screen. I have a second screen here. So also if you see me trying to navigate back and forth and trying to read my notes, just don't mind me. Yeah, and again, I don't mind if people have their cameras off because we're all zoomed out and tired. So whatever works for you. I mean, I just have a few minutes to add like opening remarks before I introduce the amazing speakers who are the focus of this event. So like, I'm not currently in Treaty 1. I miss Treaty 1 very much. Like Toronto is, anyway, people are so pretentious here, but no, I love Toronto. But I do miss Treaty 1. That's where I spent a lot of my time. But currently, like having finished school, I'll be here a while, but I'm on the traditional land of Huron-Wendat, Mississauga of the Credit, Seneca, and currently Turtle Island. It's like in the contemporary time, it's like there are literally hundreds of Indigenous groups here in Toronto. And me as a settler trying to do the work in bridging communities together instead of staying in silos. I hope this continues. Like this event looks like a great first step forward, but I hope we move beyond just conversations, right? We want some action. And speaking of action, my little segue here is that just in the news this morning and yesterday, Canada announced that it would, the settler state announced that it would start tracking in environmental racism data. And that's the new development. So I thought I'd bring it up today. It's something to look into as like even the conservative parliamentarian mentioned that prior to today, as if today marks a hallmark in Canada's history, environmental racism stuff was all talk. So now they're going to start collecting data, but we all know, everyone involved here, like in terms of like the panelists, we all know environmental racism has been going on for a long time and data has been collected, whether formally or informally. So everyone's kind of aware and the state is just catching up. And so I do hope that following this event and the amazing speakers that we have here, we move beyond just conversing about this, and we move to action, because if we're just stalling in action, we're at the same stage as the Canadian government. We all know how behind they always are. Second piece about environmental racism that I just wanted to kind of touch base on my own positionality as a migrant is that this event is specific to Manitoba, but we know that moving beyond provincial, like colonial borders, and operating both locally specific solutions and dynamics, but understanding that they go beyond the borders, the rivers, the mountains, the air, they traverse the borders that the state or colonial state has constructed. And I, on a personal note, invite people to think about how lines of solidarity can connect to beyond Manitoba, beyond quote unquote Canada, beyond quote unquote North America. Like, from my own perspective, as someone who's from Nusantara, the other name would be Malaysia or Indonesia. Canada's plastic waste winds up in our homes. It gets dumped. So like 12%, only 12% of Canada's plastic waste is recycled. I think around another 9 to 10% is dumped in the Philippines and Malaysia. I use Nusantara, which is a decolonial name, and the rest winds up in landfills that in landfills within Canada, and those landfills are located around Black and Indigenous communities, right? So that's an example of environmental racism at the quote unquote local Canadian level, but also in the global level of where it gets dumped in the global South community. So just thought I'd highlight how these dynamics unfurl beyond colonial borders. But anyway, that was my kind of 2-point spiel that I just thought I'd bring up and invite. But I'm going to move on to the bios now. And if you have any questions about that, feel free to let me know. That was like my MA research paper, which is around plastic waste. But first we have Dr. Myrle Ballard, has a PhD in natural resources and environmental management. She currently is an assistant professor of chemistry and Indigenous scholar in the Faculty of Science at University of Manitoba. She is an Anishinaabe from Lake St. Martin First Nation. Dr. Ballard has researched and documented the flooding of her traditional homelands at Lake St. Martin First Nation and will speak on this research and experience. Please, welcome, Dr. Myrle Ballard. Your bio is shorter than mine. I feel so ashamed, and you're so much more like, anyway, yeah, so.
So do I start now? Okay. Thank you for inviting me today. I want to acknowledge the lands that I'm on, the traditional Wendat territory of the Anishinaabe, and the Métis and Dene people. Today I'm going to be talking about the Lake St. Martin First Nation. Lake St. Martin First Nation was flooded out, forced displaced in 2011 during what they dubbed the super flood of the century. So Manitoba was flooded in 2011. So they diverted the water from flooding the southern part of Manitoba. They diverted the water into through the portage diversion and into Lake Manitoba, and through the Pfeffer Dam. The Pfeffer Dam is a little water control structure that was built in 1960. So what they did was the province of Manitoba declared it to be a super flood, and the province of Manitoba, enacted the Emergency Measures Act, meaning they can do whatever they want. So they manually opened the water control, those logs that are in the little water control structure of the Pfeffer Dam, and they let the water through. When they open those logs manually, when you open something manually, it's no longer natural becomes an artificial flood. So this was an artificial flood. There's a lot of water, but the flood could have been diverted somewhere else. And the province declared it an emergency on May 8th, 2011. And I was there in my community at the time and doing research with a few colleagues. And we were at the local health center, and people were standing around with just an overnight bag, and there was a few buses there, charter buses. The people thought that they were just going to be gone a few days, a few weeks, and that was 2011. It was just an overnight bag. They were gone. They were gone 8 years before the new community started, and some are still displaced, waiting to go back home. This picture here is this where my the cursor is. That's a natural shoreline. You can see the trees there. And this road that goes into the lake. It's Lake St. Martin, and they built a dike here right on the road to prevent the water from going to the other side. And we used to have baseball diamonds here. This used to be a recreational area, like a sports park kind of thing. And throughout the years, the government repeatedly flooded Lake St. Martin, the community, with the water control structure with the Faber Dam. And this baseball diamond was flooded out. It didn't exist anymore. I think the last time when they used the baseball diamond was in the 80s because of constant flooding. It just slowly withered, got destroyed. The vegetation changed and everything. And then the 2011, that was it. Everything was ruined. Homes were ruined. They just destroyed. The last remaining pasture land, there's only one man and one family that still has a few cattle, and this is where the cattle graze in this small area here. That's the last. And this land here too is wet. It's not dry. Next slide. This is where I grew up. This is my mom's house, and this is my mother here. This was before the flood. You can see what she did to take care of her house. She grew flowers in her yard. She always had a garden every year, and she planted trees right around her yard. These ones here, these are the trees that are shown here. And this is where I grew up. We used to have a big family garden, a multi-family garden here, huge garden. You know, used to have everything, corn, potatoes, you name it. And we used to have a big barn here. We used to have lots of cattle. There used to be hay fields right all over here and dotting this, going right up to shore there. And we used to walk from my mom's. We used to walk here to go swimming. Like, this is all really nice sandy beach area right along. And my mother used to go to the shore with her mother and my grandmother. They used to go there to go to the laundry, and there used to be a lot of trees there, maple trees and everything. Beautiful. And they used to walk there because it was dry and there wasn't any water, there wasn't any swamp. Next. When the flood happened, when the people were displaced, there was a lot of racism regarding policy making, and this is what this is. This is environmental racism. So there was a lot of racism when it came to the First Nations, the government, both levels of government, the federal and the provincial governments did not listen to us, simply just absolutely refused to listen to us. We had a wish list. We met with the people, we met with them workshop after workshop after workshop to determine where they wanted to relocate, and they came up with the different sites where they wanted to relocate within the Treaty 2 territory. And one of them was this location here on number 6 highway. It's in between Grimdale and Moosehorn, if you know number 6 highway. It was a really beautiful area. And we staked that land. We set up camp there. I think we were there 5 nights. And we put up a sign. Then one morning we went to check that sign. Vandals had come there and they spray painted our sign, swearing at us, making derogatory remarks at the natives of the Indians. Those kind of words. So when we selected this land, because we wanted this land because it was right on the main highway, and it was ideal land for economic development, because the First Nations want to develop their economies. So they don't want to be poor, they want to work. And this was an ideal location because it was right on the main highway. They came up with the kind of businesses they wanted. We got them to write, what did you want in a new community? And this is what they identified. And we presented the list of communities, possible locations the community wanted to the province, but the province and the federal government completely disregarded, did not want to hear us. Okay, next. This was a temporary site where it was developed for Lakes and Martin First Nation, and there were 63 houses there. One of these were brand new homes, modular homes, and each one of these homes cost about $200,000 each. And there was 63 homes. They ranged from a 2-bedroom to 6-bedroom. And they were set up for the First Nations from Lakes and Martin. And they had to clear the land because it was overgrown by brush. But one of the excuses that the province said was, we identified this to be one of the possible sites for relocating. And then the government said, the province said, no, because it's going to be too expensive to develop. Meanwhile, it already had roads in place because it was a former CFP base, and it had paved roads, it had little driveways, it had it all. The only thing that was lacking were these pools for the hydro, telephone, etc. But it already had the infrastructure in place, and that was their excuse. No, it's going to be too expensive to develop. Meanwhile, they put up these homes with an average cost of about $200,000 each. But when they put up these homes, they made it very difficult for the First Nation evacuees to move into them. The screening process was horrible. And towards the end, only probably less than 10% of these homes, 63 homes, were occupied. All the others were vacant. They were never moved into, they were never occupied because of the screening process of the paperwork that was required. It was horrible, horrible experience for them, and they just gave up. And if you do the math, at 200,000 times 63, I don't know what the number is, but if you do the math, you get to the number. And then while they were developing this, they constructed the first channel, the outer channel that was from Lake Martin to Buffalo Lake. They finished construction of that channel within the first year after being flooded out in 2011. The outlet channel cost $100 million, and they came up with that money so fast that they built the outlet channel, but they made the relocation to this temporary site so difficult and problematic. Okay, next. During the evacuation, more than 100 people died because of stress from being displaced from the land, the loneliness, the trauma. When my mother and my auntie witnessed one of the burials, they said when they dug the graves, the water came up so fast that the graves filled with water, and that's where they buried the loved ones, like they buried them in water. And a lot of the evacuees, so many of them wanted to come home, but a lot of them came home in boxes, went straight to the grave. They never made it to the new community. Next. Okay, when this was taken a couple of years ago, I went back to Lake Martin. This is the second slide that I showed you, where my mom's house was. It's not there anymore, and where I showed you, there used to be the hay fields, and there used to be a barn and cattle grazing. Okay, well, this is what it looks like now. And they don't have the trees anymore. And the trees are all dead, gone. And you can see the other side of the lake here. The other side of the lake, the trees are dead. And this is an island. This is an island, a sugar island. The island is situated on a little hill. And you can see the vegetation changed. The trees are dead, and the soil composition is also changed. The trees are gone from the shoreline. Now water has moved inland, where you can see this water vegetation. This is wet now. It's no longer dry. It's all wet. Okay, next. They started rebuilding the new community about less than a kilometer from the community of Lake Martin, the flooded out community. And they never consulted with the First Nations. Both levels of government unilaterally made the decision. They finalized the land with the local farmers in 2011, where they were gonna build the new communities. So they paid off the local farmers in 2011. So think about it. they finalized the deal in 2011, meaning they were after that land long before they flooded us out, because the province wanted that land for an easement, which means that they want a certain part of the shoreline to continue bringing up the water levels to keep them at a certain certain depth. When they cleared out this land, they had to drain the water, and when you drain the water, what does that mean? That means it's wet. So they cleared out this land, and they built the homes in this wasteland, I call it. What they did was they built up, they made mounds, and that's where they plopped the homes. Meanwhile, you have to wait for the ground, the soil, and to settle about 7 years before it becomes hardened. And many of the homes are kind of lopsided now because they just pop the homes there without waiting for the soil to settle. Next. This is what the new community looks like. This was taken this summer in August, at the end of August. And they built dikes right around the community. There's dikes, kind of ditch and drainage ditches, because they want to capture the excess water. And you can see here, this is the water going into the lake. And another thing they're doing is that the province is building an outlet channel. They're consulting with the people right now. And this new community is only a couple of square kilometers, whereas the old community was about 10 times larger than this little community. And it has absolutely no services. It doesn't have a health center. It has a little band office. It doesn't have any it doesn't have a recreational facilities. There's no churches. When people die and they take the bodies to the school, which they shouldn't, because a school is a school. They shouldn't be taking bodies there for wake services. But the old community had 3 churches, and that's where they conducted the services. Now they don't have the infrastructure in place. But they do have piped water, which is a good thing. But there's a lot of problems too with these homes because of the way they're made. Like, a lot of the people are fundraising to pay for their hydro bills, because of the hydro bills are over $1,000 for these homes. Like, they're not very well built. There's so many problems. Next. This is the proposed Lake Manitoba and Lake St. Martin outlet channel. They built the first one, the one that I was talking about, the 2011. This is where it was built, and it cost $100 million. And they built it within a few months. It was constructed and in operation. They built it so fast, and they got money so fast. Yet they waited for more than 100 people to die in my community before they relocated them. And they're going to be starting from here, Watchorn Provincial Park, and they're going to build the dike through here. It's going to cross over the main highway, and then it's going to go into Birch Bay, and the Birch Bay is where there's a lot of a lot of a waterfall. It's a natural breeding area. It's a really nice area. And then the water is going to flow through here. Came through the Narrows. This is the north side of Lake St. Martin, and this is the south side. When the engineers started developing these plans, that they didn't consider the traditional knowledge of the people. Like there's a Narrows here, and the Narrows is there for a purpose. It's there for a reason. When the excess water goes into the lake, the Narrows is going to become wider. And there's a lot of cultural, spiritual significance throughout the southeast side of the lake. And there's a lot of spiritual significance associated with the lake itself. At this side of the lake, there was a lot of battles here before the settlers arrived, and that they need to be taken into consideration. When this channel is built, the water is going to move more into the vacated reserve, because that's what the province wanted, that they wanted the Indians gone from there so they can flood that. There's a lot of traditional burial grounds here. During the Spanish flu of the early 1900s, and that's where the mass buried the dead right around there, and they're very near and the water. So when I was talking about the gravesite, when they dug the graves, the water came up, and this is what's going to happen. These burial sites are going to come up. This part here, there's a lot of natural spawning sites here for pickerel, whitefish, and this is because this part here is shallower, so that's where a lot of the spawning sites are. Then they're going to go through here into Lake Winnipeg. And then again, Lake Winnipeg, there's a lot of spawning sites here too. When we went around this summer and documented these sites, and so I have them all. The people of Lake St. Martin don't want this outlet channel. They want the outlet channel. If they're going to do it, why go through here? Go another way, like through this way. That's where they want. With the construction of this act, this channel, there's 9 pieces of legislation and acts that need to be considered, but are not considered. This is the Canada Water Act, the Canada Environmental Assessment Act, and the Fisheries Act, the Navigation Protection Act, the Migratory Birds Convention Act, and the Species at Risk Act, the Explosives Act. When the first water control structure was built here, the Fairford Dam, this part of the lake was flooded out. There was a lot of natural bird migration, little islands located throughout here where the people used to go out and gather the eggs, and now they're long gone. They don't go there anymore, and there's a lot of birds that are disappearing. They don't have frogs anymore. There's a lot of species that are at risk, and some species are gone already. Next. And that's at the end of my my talk. I think I went over.
Thank you for that. Hold on, thank you for that, Dr. Ballard. So I noticed there was a question in the chat for you, but we'll save the questions for the end. We are running a little behind on time, but that's okay. We want to let these, all these narratives unfurl. But before we move on to our next amazing speaker, I just wanted to check with Rita that your audio is working. Is
looks like muted. Hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, cool. Awesome. All right, I'm gonna read your bio. Just wanted to make sure the audio was working. Rita Francis Monias is from Pimicicama Cross Lake and has a Bachelor of Arts, Bachelor of General Studies, and a counseling certificate. Rooting back from 1993, Rita has been very passionate and dedicated towards environmental justice and human rights. Rita Monias was inspired by her father, who was also supported by her mother, who fully encouraged her to pursue going to education to learn more about how the government and corporations were impacting the environment and rights of the community. Rita will speak about the impacts of hydro development on her community. So let's all welcome Rita.
Hi. I've lived in my community for most of my lifetime. Except for the times I went to high school and university. So when I was, I know how it was before the project, pre-project and post-project, and I was in the middle of everything. So I don't know how I can't really express how much hurt we have. I'm a very emotional person, but I have seen pre and post. I have beautiful memories of the past. We used to see bedrock in the water system. We used to play. We used to swim. And we used to eat off, like, from the water, whatever edible plants there were. And then from the berries on the shorelines. So we had a beautiful setting for recreational activities, wellness activities. Sometime in 1979, 1980, I wasn't really aware of anything like for a hydro development project to be in our community or around our community, because it's only 10 miles. Okay, that's me, old school, upstream from where I live. So I started noticing this water being, is it going up and down? Why is it so different now? That was when I was about 20 to 25 years old. I started noticing the difference. And then I didn't really like what was going on because there was a big difference. It gradually went worse. Today, as an elder of our community, it's really devastating on what is going on. Our health, we lost our emotional, there's an emotional toll on people, there's a spiritual toll on people, because we had connection to the water and the land that we lived on before. Now it's just disappearing. Well, not disappearing, but the environment is so bad that it's so dangerous for our people to go around, even for recreational activities. Our shopping and fishing is, I will say, as I've known before, close to extinction, because I saw an abundance of everything that we use health-wise, like our food. Even our the sturgeon is slowly going extinct. It is going extinct, and that was it had a medicinal value of unclogging arteries. So our people have a lot of heart problems. About environmental racism, it is there, has been there, and will always be there, and it's targeted to our people. I know, because I live with it. We talk about environmental racism. There's always policies, federal and provincial policies that stop us from doing anything. Like even revitalization, rehabilitation, or sanctuaries for species, any species, even for plants, medicines, and so fishing, or trying to revitalize, rehabilitate an area for our needs to survive. That's medicinal needs, spiritual needs, and so forth. Our food. The food is totally chaotic. It's not healthy at all. We have mercury in fish. So anyway, talking about federal policies and the sanctuaries that we were talking Manitoba Hydro and the province. We're talking sanctuaries, trying to revitalize some of our species. The federal policy, Department of Fisheries and Oceans said, we sat with them too. You can't do that. You cannot do that. You're gonna disturb the environment. You're gonna disturb habitats. My God, I said, oh my God. Are you telling us that we're disturbing the environment when you are actually disturbing all of province of Manitoba? And you're gonna tell us that when we want to revive our species, our plants, our medicines, are you telling us that we're disturbing something? We're trying to rejuvenate, and we couldn't because of the fisheries, Department of Fisheries and Oceans policies. So that's environmental racism. And here, all in southern Manitoba, if you ever go to parks or anything like that, sanctuaries, you will see Manitoba Hydro sponsoring. Manitoba Hydro. Manitoba Hydro provided this money for this and so forth. And here in our homeland, there's nothing like that. Why over there when all of northern Manitoba is being destroyed by environmental destruction from hydroelectric dams? So that's environmental racism. I see that as such. Because why, when people where we provide electricity to in southern Manitoba, they get the benefit of that. We don't. And then why are our hydroelectric bills so high? Our hydroelectric bills are from anywhere from 600 to maybe 1,500 a month in the winter time. We are the people who pay the price. We pay the price of losing our livelihood, our traditional foods, our traditional medicines, and yet we're in a in the back burner of everything. Anyway, it's really, really devastating to know that. And we do have water problems. You know, E. coli, and there are tests that are done that are so biased to the advantage of the people who destroy our environment, the governments and Manitoba Hydro. So how can anybody not see that there is environmental racism within every community of the North? And they continue, the corporation continues to promote their sales as clean, green, and renewable. Why can they promote it as we are doing something for the people in northern Manitoba or in Canada, anywhere, to revitalize, rehabilitate what we have destroyed for them? So when we talk about environmental racism, it is so visible, so visible. And like I said, I get emotional when I talk about this. One time we took this federal official and Manitoba Hydro and a provincial official to a place that is so devastatingly wrecked by flooding at Sitoas. And then this federal person said, "Oh, it's so beautiful here. Oh, look at this. Oh, how beautiful." Just a foot away from where we took off from on a boat when a motor started. Not a foot away, but maybe 10 yards maybe, we hit a submerged tree and he fell backwards. And I said, "Is this beautiful?" And he just looked at me so like he looked surprised when I asked him that question. Anyway, there Manitoba Hydro and the province and the federal system were talking about remedial works, mitigation, and so forth. I live an hour. Lots of people live in our community without running water. I've been without running water for about maybe close to 10 years now. So it just looked like, the old days. It's okay. It's okay when that happens because we are a people who all believe that we can survive in any atmosphere, any environment we're at. But what was taken away from us was the most pristine and the most valuable way of life that any indigenous person can have. And it was taken away because of environmental racism. All those people in the north, they're all indigenous people. Who cares how they live? Is the attitude that I feel when we used to have meetings with Manitoba Hydro and the other parties. They don't care if they break their own policies. Even with the augmented flow, So So they're only Indians and they're only indigenous people who live north. Anyway, that's their right. I have seen that. And I have heard it. And not only that, we have been badgered with racism when we were sitting down with Manitoba Hydro. One time we wanted to get a little bit more expenses for traveling back and forth. And then this one guy said, you don't need anything like that. You know, you just go down to the post office there. Food is very cheap there. You can afford it there. That is not environmental racism, but it is racism. And that is what we go through. That is what we're living now. And we'll continue to live like that if we don't do anything, if we do not get up. So I have been a very active person on telling the true story of what we go through with the corporations, the corporation, and the federal and provincial government. I sent some pictures to Laura about an area, a picture of equal where there's blue green algae in the system. It is all over our community. It's all over coming downstream to our community and going through. It's there, up there in the north. And these boil water advisories. We don't need boil water advisories. We need clean water. And there has to be a way that these people can address our needs rather than putting us in their backyards like they have always did. So anyway, talking about environmental racism, policies are made to discriminate us. There are policies, you know. And then why? There's still beef. There's this Bill C-57, and there's still this Bill C-230 or whatever to redress. How can you redress anything when you have already broken it? And when it is broken by policy already, we don't see these policies of clean environment that they say they implement in Canada. There's nothing that would ever do that for us here, because we've been through this since when was the first Kelsey, somewhere in the 50s. It affected us. Where we took those people, Manitoba Hydro and the governments, where we took them, that's the works of the Kelsey Dam and the Jenpeg Dam made it even worse. That's where our people were displaced from. That's their traditional homeland. And they moved into this reserve of oppression, political oppression, federal oppression, incarceration within the reserve system that we cannot move, do anything without having to address the federal government through the Band Council resolutions. Plus, Band Council resolutions don't have any bearing in doesn't have any bearing in the law. It's only a piece of paper that never goes to Ottawa. And in our population, we have so many people in Crosshead, and there's a backlog of maybe about 6 years within the federal system. That's why we're called minorities. Our records are not. That's environment. That's racism. So anyway, regardless of these policies that are out there in the federal system, won't do anything because we know already, we have experience. We have experience. We lived it and will continue to live it. But then at this moment, I like using the word but I don't. So we are doing something about it. We are making our voices being heard. We can no longer be kept in silence and suffer the secrecy that is not really known out there by many people. The secrecy of racism, environmental racism, whatever kind of racism there is. Even we're told to shut up, don't talk about anything. But we're not quitting. Are seeing us indigenous people who do not have rights, and we have rights. We do have rights. And it will not be the end of our story about environmental racism. It's just heading on strong on what we've been doing because we're tired of being discriminated. So with that, I'd like to thank you people for listening to a person whose heart has broken all her life because she has seen so much damage done on our people and so much damage on our youth, our future, your future, your children's future, your grandchildren's future, great grandchildren's future, mine and your Pallister's children, grandchildren, and great grandchildren. And any official who is involved in any corporation or industry destroys the environment, their children, grandchildren, great grandchildren. There's too, theirs, and they continue to make policies that carry racism and environmental racism for the indigenous of our country. And the biggest in Manitoba are hydro developments.
Thank you, Rita. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Just wanted to, if you had any like in a minute or to just kind of any final words for your segment, although we do have the question period. I apologize to everyone that we're going a little over time, but I do think it's important for the stories to be given space. But did you have any, in 1 minute, any words you wanted to say, Rita?
What's that?
Did you have any words you wanted to say in a minute before we move on to the next speaker? Although we will have questions for all the panelists at the end. Just to wrap up.
We all together. We all have to see what environmental racism is and work together from there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rita, for your story. I know, like, if you're interested, if a panelist is interested in more information, yeah, please inquire at the end. Moving along, I really apologize that I'm kind of, again, I'm stressing that it's over time, but we're letting the stories breathe. But let's move on to the next speaker. We have Johsa Manzanilla, who goes by she, her, Sia, is a Philippine-born community organizer based in Treaty 1 territory and has been a member of Migrante Manitoba for just over 10 years. She is also an artist using creative expression as a means for activism, and in her writing and performances, she focuses on the rights of migrant workers, the experiences of racialized diaspora, and the impact of resource extraction on post-colonial and Indigenous communities. Let's welcome Johsa, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for having us. I'm just going to try to find my, here we go, my presentation. So yeah, as Hazim said, I'm a settler arrivant from the archipelago of islands known as the Philippines. And I immigrated to Turtle Island when I was 4, here to Treaty 1. Just a little bit about my organization. So Migrante is affiliated with a number of other chapters across the country as well as across the world. Although our casework, by the name of it, Migrante, focuses a lot on migrant workers, we also recognize that we're talking about change. In order to have revolutionary change, there has to be an analysis of the root causes of why the work is needed. So that's why part of Migrante's work is to also address the socioeconomic changes that need to happen in the Philippines, because if we don't address that, there will continue to be forced migration. So today I'm going to talk briefly, because I know I only have 10 minutes. I want to talk about 4 main areas. I'm going to talk about a little bit of the situation in the Philippines. I'm going to talk about Canadian mining. I'm going to connect it to why here in Manitoba, here on Treaty 1, or even anywhere else that people are calling in from, why it's important. And then lastly, I'm going to do something about an action-based, like what can we do about it. So I guess I'll begin. So this is a picture of my friend Ninita. Ninita is from Zamboanga del Norte, which is in the south of the Philippines, Mindanao. She's a member of the Subanen, which is an indigenous peoples who are Lumads. Lumads are indigenous people in Mindanao. And in 1996, Toronto Ventures Incorporated Pacific, so TVI, many of you might be familiar with that company, began mining and extracting copper from Mount Canatuan, which is just around where Ninita's community is, and that is a sacred place for the Subanen. Now, Myrle talked a little bit about how, and even actually Rita talked about free, prior, and informed consent. And this is no exception. Ninita's ancestral homeland was forcibly taken. That means, so in the Philippines, how this manifests is corporations will come in, and they come in under the Mining Act of the Philippines, which was introduced in 1995. And according to the Mining Act, basically it gives free rein for any transnational corporations who want to come in, because the Philippine government, their rationale at the time was they wanted to encourage foreign investment into the economy. So what they ended up doing was, in this Mining Act, is to make it appealing, any mining corporation that wanted to be in the Philippines to perform resource extraction basically got full political rights, full ownership of the land. I am not making that up, and a tax holiday. And by that, I mean, basically they get like a contract for the land, and they're given, let's say, 10 years to not be charged any taxes from it. And basically what happens is mining companies will come in, they'll do their business on the land, will not do free, prior, informed consent. In fact, if they do greenwash the process, basically what they do, backed by the National Commission of Indigenous Peoples, what they'll do is they'll do like a survey of the indigenous communities that may be impacted in the area. They will identify the indigenous leaders that are in support of, or maybe it's not even maybe in support, but maybe there's not a lot of resistance to it. And then what the company does is they selectively invite those that are in support of it and completely stonewall everybody out. So a lot of these communities, they come in and they're basically tricked into consenting without being given the full picture. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about what some of those implications are. I'm just going to show. So Nita came to Winnipeg actually and spoke about her situation. So this is Mount Kanatuan mine. You can see that like the very clear devastation of the land in vast contrast to juxtaposing right behind it the land and basically what's been done to the land. But some of the other things, when I was there in the Philippines and working with some of the communities that were affected, some examples include victimization of women, victimization of children. They will tell the community, okay, now that you've consented, we're going to build this road so that you can access your community through the road. But when I was in Mid-Salip, which is in Zamboanga del Sur, the community in Balabag, they were telling me that, so they'd build a road, the mining company would build a road and tell the community, you can use that road to get through like all the mining operations. But then just for funsies, they will literally, if anyone's familiar with the word strafing is where they randomly decide to open fire on people. So as people are using the road to get through, like and this road has been established for them to go around it, they will murder people and shoot and without discrimination, like they just shoot at everybody. So yes, there's targeted acts of violence against people, and targeted acts of violence against those that are most marginalized, including Indigenous communities, the Moro, which are non-colonized people in the South who are Muslim, and the peasants who are very poor. Of course, people from the islands are all people of color, but there's definitely more there are certain individuals that are more vulnerable. Another thing I wanted to point out is in the Philippines, anybody who organizes or who speaks out against the government, they are targeted. Nanita, for example, she has been separated from her family. Like she is still separated from her family. From my experience of working with activists in the Philippines, many of them will go months, if not years, separation by choice from their families because they are targeted. People go missing, people are outright murdered, people are tortured. So people choose to separate from their families in order to keep their families safe. If you are familiar with the president of the Philippines, he is just really anyone who speaks out, he says, kill them all, shoot them. In the Philippines, even though we don't have treaties like here in Canada, and I mean, even treaties are questionable, but the Indigenous Peoples' Rights Act was established in 1997, 2 years after the Mining Act. And that's the timing is very indicative because much of the development projects are actually manipulated, like the free prior informed consent is manipulated in order to just get around and still do resource extraction projects in this area. One such example is, in Bukidnon, which is also in Mindanao, the Lumad communities were organizing, and what the paramilitary do. So mining companies will hire private security. So it's classic divide and conquer, will hire private security of locals, many of whom are related to some of the Indigenous communities, Indigenous leaders, and they will kind of like take them and try to, and they will make them be the actors of oppression against their own people. And so what they've done is like they will bomb schools, straight up bomb schools, and target people to intimidate them, to prevent them from doing blockades, from asserting their rights. This is a little bit outdated. I realize it's from 2012, but this is just to demonstrate HRVs are human rights violations, to show that almost 3/4 of human rights violations are related to dams or mining, and then also logging. This is another link. So you can see here, another table. So you can see here that Indigenous peoples, peasants, so those who are most socioeconomically affected, and the Moro, who I'd alluded to, these are people that are often targeted. And by extrajudicial killings, I mean killings, murders that are done outside of the court of law, or not that there is but they're basically done by state actors, perpetrated by the state, and people who go missing. This is just a visual to show some of the different, this is the islands of the Philippines, but you can see over 20 years, the different kinds of mining disasters that have been, natural disasters that are related to the mines that were established there by foreign transnational corporations. So just a little bit, I mean, all of you are very familiar with the resource extraction piece, but Canada owns 57% of the world's public mining companies. The TSX, which is the Toronto Stock Exchange, lists the most mining companies in all of the world. And another fact is even if it's like, let's say it's based in the Netherlands, most mining companies, because of Canada's lax mining laws, resource extraction accountability laws, they will open up a branch in Canada where they kind of like put through like a lot of their international projects, because recognizing that Canada, not only do we have lax laws, but we seem as a state to be invested in it. Like many of our pensions are invested in mining and oil companies all over the world. It is very complex to divest from that. And the government of Canada knows that. Moreover, I know Rita was mentioning like what mechanisms are there to get justice, and even with the laws that are really very weak, the fact that we are invested through our pensions, but thirdly, the current justice mechanisms are super weak. If any of you are familiar with the Canadian Ombudsman for resource extraction, so a few years ago, there was a move towards making sure that there was some kind of representative who could, like an administrative tribunal where people who, complainants who were affected by human rights abuses abroad perpetrated by Canadian companies could go to this Canadian ombudsman and basically air their grievances to hold these companies accountable. And the government has honestly, they're like, I guess maybe to get elected, they're like, yes, let's establish the ombudsman. But the thing is, this ombudsperson has no teeth. They don't have the authority to investigate under the Inquiries Act. Basically, people are not compelled to testify under oath in front of them. And Jim Carr, when he's natural resource extraction or natural resources minister, had even said, like, you know, we can actually review the whistleblowers and the survivors of human rights abuses. So who would want to go up against the government when there's so much that would be put up against them? And so this is hugely problematic, and it's very indicative of the approach that our government has with Indigenous peoples here. And so basically, to sum up, back to Canadian complicity, the Canadian government and mining corporations that come out of Canada don't seem to respect Indigenous people here, as evidenced by the narratives that are shared tonight from Rita, and I know Drey is going to speak, as well as Myrle. Drey is going to speak after. But if they don't respect Indigenous peoples here, they don't respect Indigenous people abroad. And I think that's what's really important, is why we need to link up. This is the basis of unity, and I think, maybe call me a little pragmatic and optimistic here, but I think that there's an opportunity here for us to be able to like share our struggles, talk about how we have like shared experiences, but also share that we can find solutions. CORE, that Canadian ombudsperson, that is an opportunity, but unfortunately, if we don't push forward, there's places like Guatemala, Nicaragua, Honduras, these other countries all over the world where Indigenous people are experiencing oppression by Canadian mining corporations, they can have that mechanism too. So I think that there is potential here, and that's what I'm going to close with is, I think that if we can link together and then organize together to target those mechanisms that do exist so that we can leverage them, perhaps we can be revolutionary and make change. So
Thank you, Johsa, for that. And thank you for the call to kind of connect our lines of solidarities across borders and experiences. Highly encourage Black, Indigenous people of color in this session today to connect with each other so that can actually happen. And yeah, so moving on, again, we're over time, but that's okay because we want the stories to keep going. We have Drey Smith. Drey Smith is a young Ojibwa man from the small community of Hollow Water First Nation, which is located on the east shores of Lake Winnipeg. He is a hunter, fisherman, and land and water defender. He is a descendant of one of the original families in Hollow Water and the founder of Camp Morningstar, which was established on February 16, 2019 to stop a proposed silica sand mine extraction project that was proposed in the community on their traditional lands and territory. The camp is still going strong today. To anyone who may want to reach him, he says, "You can always find me where the wind blows and the water flows. Ka nagamut migan." Please, everyone, let's welcome Drey.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me here this evening. These are all really powerful stories that I've just heard. I just had a little video I wanted to share with everybody before I started talking about things. So I'm going to share that video right now.
Last year, members of Hollow Water set up a peace camp to oppose the project. They had concerns about the environmental impacts, including the destruction of the community trapline. The company says they have faced some financial setbacks, but production should begin in 2022.
Was that shareable? Did it share? Yeah, can everybody hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, so this is the actual teepee that I set up at the time of 2 years ago now, I guess it was. There's so much I can say about environmental racism to me, like just from everything that I was hearing from the past speakers. It was really touching for me because like years ago in Lake St. Martin, I was at the first hand of experiencing what environmental racism was. And I'm not going to use that term environmental racism. I'm going to use the term colonialism. So what has happened back then, like I was there in Lake St. Martin when it first flooded, the very first flood back in like 2011. I was working for a construction company. And it was really, you know, it was really, what I experienced there, it was really hard feeling, like, you know, having to destroy people's homes, having to be told what to do by the government. I know I have a short amount of time here talking, but I won't get too much into that. But everything that I've been hearing, you know, everything that I read, everything that I learned with this whole experience, like even within my own community, it's there's something that's definitely going on with mining and the environment, and you know, like the list goes on. Every day there's always something new that I find out, and that, you know, it drives me more to do what I'm doing now. Like that in my community with the silica sand project that was being proposed, I actually worked for that company. And you know, the things that I seen there, what was going on, how it was being done, how it was being put on to like the community, it's been really you know, it wasn't the way things should have been, because all it was the company just coming in there and they were like dictating, you know, like what they're going to do and how they're going to do it, and they basically going to destroy our land basically. So finally I had enough of that. I got sick of it, and I just turned around. And then in the video, if you guys caught the video or were able to see it, there's 4 guys, including myself. We were the ones that set up this teepee here. And that was like it was a huge thing for me. Like I went through a huge change of life and everything like that. Like as an Indigenous person, I always knew that it was in me. It's in my DNA to protect the land, protect the water, protect everything that helps us who we are as Indigenous people. So with all that being said, like, you know, I see a lot of things today, and I see so much people hurting, and I see so much pain in everybody from seeing everything that they've seen, like these elders that speak about how things used to be in the past when they were kids, and it's not like that anymore. That opens my eyes to see what's going to be there for like my children and my grandchildren and my great grandchildren. You know, it's not going to be the same. It's not going to be the same experience that I experienced when I was a kid. Like on Lake Winnipeg, for example, like when I was about 10 years old, I was able to drink from that lake. And now you take your kid to the beach, you know, they get a little bit of water in their mouth and they accidentally swallow it, and then they get sick right away. So I think like this environmental racism is really real. And I've been experiencing a lot of things at firsthand, like for my community alone. Like there's so much cottage lot development around my whole community. And, you know, things are happening there where I can't even go in a bush anymore and do the things that I used to do. There's certain places that I'm allowed to hunt. There's certain places that I'm allowed to fish. And even when I go to these certain places, I'm still being harassed by government officials telling me I can't hunt there, telling me I can't fish here. You know, and then they, after the fact, they want to hand out thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars of tickets to you for not following their rules and regulations. And I disagree with that, because for thousands of years, Indigenous people have been living and thriving off of this land the way their ancestors did, the way my ancestors did. So any piece of paper or any piece of legislation or whatever, you know, to me now, the way I live my life now, none of it applies to me. I'm going to live my way. I'm going to live my life the way my ancestors intended it to be. And like, I don't know, like there's so much little time for all the things that I have to say, and I really don't know. I struggle how to put everything into like a 10-minute segment or whatever speech time I have. But there's just so much going on. Like, you know, with Camp Morningstar, what happened there? Like, I only did that, I don't know, it must have went with my age, I guess, but you know, I've seen a lot of things in my time, and I experienced a lot of things, you know, and I didn't like the feeling of being told what we can do there and what we can't do on our land. You know, and we're just like being pushed aside, and there's like so much history there just in my community alone, where there's an island across the lake from my homeland where my ancestors used to live. That used to be our original home, and they were moved there years ago. They were moved away from their original homeland, and the only reason why they were moved was because of industry. There was a silica sand mine there. Big corporations wanted that sand. They wanted all the timber that was there. You know, and it's like history repeating itself again. Because now, like where I'm from now, it's happening again. And the community, our traditional land is getting smaller and smaller, but the community population is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And we're running out of, you know, space to live. It's just like the Lake St. Martin flood. I was fortunate enough to have the opportunity to go back there and help rebuild that community. And that made me feel really good, because when I was there back in 2011, you know, I was there to destroy it. And, you know, it didn't sit well with me. So after all of that stuff, like with Camp Morningstar and all that, like, you know, I know as much as people want to hear all the logistics of the technical stuff and all that, like, you know, there's just so much BS there that the government and all these consultants and the company put on to people. Like, there's stacks and stacks of documents that, you know, it take a long time to go through. So like, I can't explain all that in like 10 or 15 minutes, but at the end of the day, for me, like, you know, I'm never gonna stop doing what I do. I don't just do this for like for a job or a hobby or anything like that. It's like, you know, it's just the system. It's oppressing our people more and more every day with what's going on, and I'm just fed up with it. I hear so much stories from elders. I always hear stories from elders. I sit and I listen to them, and it you know, it gives me so much inspiration that, you know, like they say that, you know, kids aren't doing anything, like, you know, like there's nothing for them to do, which is true, because all of our youth, they're all oppressed by the system. You know, they're all addicted to substance, you know, the substance abuse. There's a lot of kids that are in the CFS system. You know, it drives them to drink, it drives them to do drugs, it drives them to do a lot of things. And there's reasons for that. And those reasons are they lost touch with their culture. That's what I believe it is. And when I set up that camp, and my 4 brothers, you know, a lot of us were dealing with issues. A lot of them were dealing with issues. I dealt with drugs and alcohol issues at a point in my life. They were, but what we did there was more than just stopping a mine from coming into our territory. What we did there was we showed initiative to not be oppressed by the system anymore. We showed, you know, we wanted to live how it's like in us. It's built in our DNA to live the kind of life that our ancestors lived, rather if it's poor or being rich or anything like that. Like, you have so much rich people that come into, you know, around my community where they have like $5 or $10 million cabins and stuff like that. You know, they don't, the way, you know, local people live out there. And that's the type of stuff, you know, that gets me really frustrated and everything. So, and I think, you know, like everything else, there's just so much things that are happening and that's going on. And I work, you know, I pretty much devoted my whole life now to making environmental issues a big issue. Because it is real. It's always Indigenous people that are at firsthand affected by these big corporations and, you know, like destroying our land, destroying our culture, destroying everything. For what? For money? Like, money is priceless when it comes to, you know, like going out on the land. You can't put a price on that, on the natural beauty of everything. And not just the natural beauty, but I mean the natural resources that we have. Like, we have all these traditional medicines, we have everything. We got all the traditional water. Like, you know, there's just so much out there that's, and it's just like, I don't know, it's saddening when you got to hear, it saddens me when I need to hear, like, you know, elders, and, you know, they get emotional with a lot of things that they talk about, which is true. But I mean, you know, like I said, that gives me a lot of inspiration to just continue doing what I am doing and making sure that it's done properly, because nobody else is out there to do it. No one else is gonna, like, you know, go grab a bunch of kids and go take them out on the land and show them what it's really about, and try to get them out of the drugs and alcohol, try to get them out of the state that they're in. Like, as much as I want to go on and on with the Camp Morningstar thing, like, you know, there's a lot more to it than what it really is, and what the time frame that I have to talk about it. But if anybody has like questions to ask or anything like that, I'm more than willing to answer any questions that anybody may have, or if it's not just about Camp Morningstar, it could be about anything else. I think that's wraps it up for me.
Thank you, Drey. Yeah, if anybody has questions, I understand the panel format isn't the greatest for letting stories kind of like really have their space given a time limit, but I hope people do inquire further about these stories and connect beyond. We do have time for our questions. I have the initial questions that were posed earlier in the chat. These are taken from the chat. So I can go through them, but if people want to post their questions, which panelists they're directing them at, if there is no kind of panelist identified in your question, then that question is going to be given to everyone. But the first question that was posted is for Dr. Ballard. And the question is it common to build communities without consulting First Nations communities?
Yeah, it's common to do that. For example, there's another community that was displaced because of a Manitoba hydro dam that was built. That was Chimawang First Nation. They were displaced from their community. They got moved about 30, 50 miles to the west of the dam, and that's where they were relocated without their consent. And the people of Taduli were displaced too. At Taduli Lake, they were displaced because the food source was gone because of a misunderstanding with the provincial COs, the conservation officers. And Lake Martin, when the community was displaced, they didn't consult the community where they were going to build the new community. They just did it on their own to purchase the land from the farmers. And this land, like I mentioned, they had to drain it, and it's not feasible at all. There's no opportunities for businesses, no economic opportunities. There's a lot of social problems because of the youth being displaced. They're in a state of shock, I guess. There's a lot of drugs. There's been at least drug deaths related to drugs at least every other week, which is bad, very serious. So consultation, no, it doesn't happen. In this day and age, it still doesn't happen. It should. My community was displaced already 3 times. The first time they were displaced from roaming and free on the land, they were put onto reserves, and then they got displaced again to make way for the provinces and for, water control structures.
Thank you, Dr. Ballard. We actually, the next 2 questions are for you as well. So then the second question that I have is, how can non-Indigenous people support your important work?
That's a really good question, because we need support, all the support we can get. When we were first displaced in 2011, we held demonstrations, we occupied the legislative grounds, we had rallies, we demonstrated the outlet, the channel site of the first one. Nobody ever supported us. It was so hard when you had to do things by yourself. When we had that camp, nobody supported us. And yet the people knew we were displaced, and then nobody supported us. The outlet channel that is being built right now, it's going to cause a lot of damage. And again, nobody's supporting us. Nobody's speaking out on our behalf. Nobody is holding rallies to stop this process of the government from doing that. We need help. Maybe we need to come up with different strategies, but we have to do something, because people are going to suffer again, and people are going to die. The traditional burial sites are going to be the water is going to displace them, and loved ones. It's going to be a mess.
Thank you for that again, Dr. Ballard. Like earlier in my kind of opening remarks, I did mention action. So here's a tangible action: is to support Dr. Ballard's work in future, whatever their actions for non-Indigenous people, including myself. The next question is also for you, Dr. Ballard. What is your vision for educating all people to work actively for reconciliation, anti-racism, and environmental stewardship? Are we still teaching the colonial story in natural resources management and the environment? Okay, I guess it's a 3-part question. So, but what is needed to change to a regenerative economy that is pro-Indigenous? So
People,
sorry, I did you want me to break that into 3?
no, I remember.
Okay, thank you.
Oh no, people need to be educated. People need to learn what's going on. We need to start with within the school systems. The youth need to learn about Indigenous First Nations history, because there's a lot that happened when the settlers first arrived, and the Indian Act, it has done so much damage. The Indian Act took away the First Nations people's ability to look after themselves. It took away their livelihood. It took away the independence that they had. When you track the various decades within the Indian Act, you could visibly see what happened through those decades when a piece of legislation was introduced. They introduced the reserve housing in the late 50s. From then on, they wanted to look after the Indians. They took away the ability for the First Nation to build their own houses. So my grandfather built their own house, and my relatives. They took away that ability. They said, "We're going to look after you. We're going to give you these cardboard homes." And then from there, spiraling were all kinds of problems, social problems, health problems, you name it. They went on and on. But the people will need to be educated about the Indian Act and the various legislation pieces that are out there. Almost the legislation, there's a section in there where they have to consult with Indigenous peoples, but they're not doing it. They're getting away with it. They're just checking off. They consult, they call in a room full of people, and then they make their presentations. And that's what they're called on duty to consult. There needs to be a reconciliation. There needs to be even better ways of communicating. They need to consult. There needs to be more forums like this where we can educate people, but we have to work together as well. We need support. That we can't do this by ourselves. And we need to change our plans as well. For example, the Lake St. Martin, it's been through a lot. It's been flooded. Maybe we should take a stand and get the lake to be designated personhood, and to have its own rights, legal rights. They did this with the Magpie River in Quebec, and well, maybe we need to do this for Manitoba, to take a stand against the outlet channel, which is going to be creating a lot more problems against Manitoba Hydro, and the destruction of the waters.
Thank you, Dr. Ballard. So we have around, well, I mean, we're already over time, but assuming we have around 9 minutes left here. But so 2 more questions. One is for Johsa, Dr. Ballard, and Rita. What is needed for environmental assessment? What is needed to protect Indigenous traditional territory? So maybe give Dr. Ballard a break for speaking and put you third. But Rita, did you want to speak to that? Oh, I think you're on mute, Rita. Rita, I think you need to unmute your audio there. Okay.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Yeah,
hear.
we need education to everybody, not only the school system, but we need when people want to get involved in something like this and they're concerned about these environmental issues, then we can probably network with more people, with more organizations. I would suggest the one thing that I'm in right now is with Northeast 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 American Maritime Resistance Alliance. I work for them. I work for them from here, and those are the people who are working on that Quebec Muscat Dam and so forth. And we involve people who are interested, and it's a big group. And about education in the school system, the federal school system, I tried that. I was a teacher for 1 year. I didn't want to teach anymore. I taught for 1 year. I didn't want to teach anymore because what I taught the students that time, the principal pulled me into his office and told me it's not in a curriculum, so don't do that. That's another thing that's going on, and it has been in the curriculum, the provincial standards, and so forth. If they don't agree with what we want to teach our children in the school system, then we have to make our own educational system for people. And we have to, I have a Facebook page that I address every environmental issue. And there are some laws that are broken. And when there is consultation going on, it is not consultation to the people, and it is supposed to be consultation to the people, not to the band councils. They talk to about 7 or 8 people, 9 people in the band council. The federal government, the provincial government are talking to these people, and they are out of their system. Of course, they'll agree, because their policies. They're federal policies, and the band system is a federal entity. So, is there anything else?
Thank you, Rita. The same question for Johsa about environmental assessment and what's needed.
I don't know if I can comment really on environmental assessment per se. I think it's important. I would echo Rita that it's important to, like, I know that Hazim, you had mentioned how there's going to start tracking data on environmental racism. And I'm a little bit critical of the methodology sometimes, and because it's all about power. It's all about who's collecting that information and to what end, right? A lot of mining transnational corporations, they have a corporate social responsibility branch. So they survey and they try to collect information, but it's really so that they can greenwash their policies and then market it and make it seem like it's environmentally friendly when it is not at all. It is super shady. It's very, very non-truthful. So I guess my answer to what is needed to protect Indigenous traditional territory is, I think that there isn't one way to attack the beast. I think it's important that there needs to be as many people on all levels to make those changes. So everybody has unique gifts, everybody has unique capacities, and if they can contribute in whatever way. I know there's probably lawyers on this call, there's social workers on this call, there's environmentalists who are on this call. If everybody they're able to identify where they can contribute, then we can attack the beast that is colonialism, neocolonialism, and capitalism in the form of these companies and speak out. CORE, the ombudsman, is one way, but there needs to be people on the back end who are pushing to change that. But likewise, there needs to be people And I mean, all the people on this call are amazing because you were there, you were physically there to protect the land. And there, so I guess my answer is, in any way that you know that you can contribute, you gotta contribute, because there's like, we can't just do it alone, and it's not in silos. There's potential, but we just got to get organized.
Thank you, Johsa. The same question, what is needed for environmental assessment? What is needed to protect Indigenous traditional territory? Again, for Dr. Ballard, and as well for Drey after. So Dr. Ballard?
Yeah, I think what is needed for an environmental assessment is for Indigenous peoples, the ones that are impacted, to design their own environmental assessments, because right now we're relying on a government implemented environmental assessment, and this is not working. So we have to come up with our own and do what works for us. The government just recently added the impacts of health to the CEAA just recently, not that long ago, but I think it needs a complete overhaul. When the government talks about prior informed consent, they're forgetting one important word there, free prior informed consent, meaning that they have to talk to all the people, not just the ones in leadership. That word is missing, a free prior informed consent. And like I said before, to protect Indigenous traditional territories, we need to go one step up further and give these traditional territories a personhood, so that they can have their own legal status. I think that's the only way that's going to work. And because they have voices too, and we need to speak up for them.
Thank you, Dr. Ballard. And Drey, did you want to answer that question?
Sure. Environmental. What was the question again?
So I think your audio just kind of maybe it's just my connection, but your audio went a little out just now. What were you saying?
What was the question again?
Oh, just read it. What is needed for environmental assessment? And then what is needed to protect Indigenous traditional territory?
So I think one of the biggest important things that wasn't, or that it was just like an environmental impact study that was done like within, when Camp Morningstar was going on, the company Canadian Premium Sand, you know, they were required to do that. But what happened was there was an all-weather road that was being built on the east side of Lake Winnipeg, going up to connect Bloodvein and Barons River and all these First Nation communities on the side. So what happened was they used that same environmental impact study assessment, and it was like, you know, there's nobody living out there or anything like that. So the environmental impact study that should have been done around my community, because there's so much houses and communities like really close around that whole mine site. So it wasn't done properly, and you know, like with the Section 35 and all that stuff, you know, that's just, it's a big gone show. All these systems and policies and all of this is not working, and it hasn't been working. You know, their systems haven't been working for Indigenous people since they were ever drafted up. So I think what the doctor is saying here, that we need to try and develop our own systems, makes a lot of sense. And I've like heard a lot of stories from elders talk about the original law and all that stuff. Like we need to go back to our old ways and, you know, how we decided on laws and how, you know, like how we decided on all kinds of things as Indigenous people. So I think it's really important that we all work together and figure out these alternative ways on how to stop all this nonsense from happening, and just allowing these big corporations and all forms of government push First Nations people around. And, you know, I think it's really important that we all try and work together and get it done in a better and efficient way.
Thank you, Drey. I realize, so maybe we have time for just one last question for everyone, and to just kind of wrap things up nicely is, how can we all connect beyond this event? And so this is sort of your call to action to continue the conversation beyond this particular event. We'll go in order of the speakers, and feel free to connect with speakers after this, but please keep in mind that if you're going to engage, do not expect that labor for free. Go do your homework first. But yeah, so how can we all connect after this this particular event? Dr. Ballard?
Yeah, I think this is very interesting, an interesting dialogue. And I think we need to connect more, even do a virtual coffee house, virtual coffee, drop in for coffee kind of thing. It's very interesting because we're all like minds. We're fighting for the same thing, and the environment, the waters, and we need to come together, strategize and then just to stay, and just to share stories as well.
Thank you. Rita, did you want to answer to that? How can we connect after this event? I think you need to unmute again.
Yeah, okay, well, I'm gonna I will give some suggestions that I have been involved with. I've been involved with Manitoba Energy Justice, and one is Katan, a Northern Hydro Impacted Communities forum that's out there, and I'm also involved in Dam Watch International. And then, and like I said, I work for the Northeast American Northeast American Mega Dam Resistance Alliance. So with all networking, if we can do that and make suggestions to the panel here, maybe that would be a good idea, because that's what we've been doing. That's what I've been involved, like I said, since 1992, 92, 93, yeah. And we did a lot of public campaigning. Well, we did some campaigning in the United States of how much environmental damage there is in northern Manitoba. So the word is out there. We have a lot of allies, a lot of allies by name, not by groups, but those are the groups that I'm talking about, that I mentioned. Those are groups that could really help us work into getting this environmental assessment or whatever we're going into. So that's it.
Thank you so much, Rita. There will be questions, obviously. Beyond, oh, sorry, what were you saying? There was a lag.
What's that?
I think I accidentally cut you off there. Were you saying something?
No, I wasn't.
Thank you.
No, you didn't cut me off.
Okay, there's a bit of a lag. Sometimes I'm just trying to navigate that, but thank you so much. There are additional questions that people will have. You can reach out either through MEJC or directly to the speakers themselves. Be respectful and mindful of the labor and time you take. So the same question, how can we connect after this? For Johsa?
Yeah, I just put it in the chat, but you can connect with me via Instagram or Facebook. It's at Migrante Manitoba. I can just type it right now. But we would be, even though, like I said, it looks like we're just focused on migrant rights, we would absolutely be happy to support any of your work. I'm saddened to hear that nobody's campaign. I can tell you, Migrante will show up and be there for you. If you want us to sign petitions, we'll do that. We'll do everything that we can. We feel that if Indigenous people here in Turtle Island do not get justice, and you are here on this land, and if the government doesn't listen to you, there's no way in heck that they will listen to any other Indigenous people that they're oppressing in other countries. So you are the closest to get it. If you can get justice, that gives all of us hope in other states that are being oppressed by our government. So yeah, happy to support you in any way that we can.
Thank you, Johsa. And last but not least, Drey, how can we connect after this event?
I think it's in my bio. No, I guess MJMC, I guess, whoever wants to get in touch with me can probably get my email from them. That's pretty much the only way. And yeah, I would like to have like what the doctor was saying there, like having a visual coffee drop-in thing. That would be something too.
Thank you. I really like how you're referring to Dr. Myrle Ballard as the doctor. I just noticed that. You are the doctor. So just to kind of wrap things up, thank you everyone for being here. I noticed there's still a lot of people here, which is amazing because I know we went over time. This is a really important conversation to keep going beyond this space, right? Not just touch and go and feel good and I just talked about environmental racism. I'm so woke now. So let's translate that into action. I'm sure MEJC has actions. All the panelists here today have like concrete actions you can do, no excuses. Connect with them. So thank you so much everyone for being here today. I'm gonna hand it over to Laura, or yes, I think it's Laura, but to kind of say any final housekeeping words to everyone.
Great, thanks so much, Hazim, and to all of our speakers. This has been just a really powerful conversation. I was just saying to someone that I think that we could have had an hour, like a separate event for each speaker to really give enough space to the stories and the knowledge that was shared here. So, and I know there's a lot of interest in the chat for future events and keeping in touch. So I would encourage folks to, as Hazim mentioned, find all of the speakers here on the websites and the sort of handles that they promoted in the chat. You can also follow the Manitoba Energy Justice Coalition on our social media for more events like this, and we're always open to ideas that people have for other events similar to what's been mentioned here. We do have also open organizing meetings if people want to get more involved in helping to organize events like this and other actions and solidarity work. We do meet on Tuesday evenings and we have open meetings, so you can follow on our social media or sign up on our website and get the information for our Zoom meetings that way. Finally, we did record the conversation this evening, and we do plan to post it on the Facebook event page for anyone who wasn't able to make it for the recording or for the call this evening. Maybe one final round of applause for everyone this evening and for all of the people who came. We had about 100 participants, so that's awesome. And yes, stay in touch.
Bye.
Bye.